What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Talking Pigskin. As always, I'm your host Keshwar, and tonight we're going to review AFC and NFC North. Now, last week we covered the West. Now we're moving to the North side of the NFL. Let's start with the AFC North and with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, in previous years, we always expect the Baltimore Ravens to be this vaunted defensive powerhouse that always threatens the opposition. However, this year's a little different. They lost C.J. Mosley. They lost Darius Smith. They lost Eric Weddle. They lost a lot of key pieces on that defensive side, including Terrell Suggs. Now, this is going to be a rebuild year for them. Granted, on the offensive side of the ball, Lamar Jackson, he needs to start running with that football. He needs to figure out how to pass more. And especially with the addition of Mark Ingram on that offensive side of the ball, they should be able to hand it off to him more as opposed to Lamar Jackson running all the time. Sure, Michael Crabtree is also gone, so they don't have a lot of receivers to rely on, but they did draft Marquise Brown in the first round of this year's draft, so hopefully he will be a easy plug-in receiver to play with. He was highly regarded pre-draft, so hopefully that will be the case for Baltimore. While on the defensive side of the ball, they also added Earl Thomas and Shane Ray. So granted, a lot of the big names left, but they have a couple of decent players, even though Earl Thomas did leave last year with the season-ending injury, so I don't know how long he's going to be effective. But they will take a step back this year. Unfortunately, they're not going to be the Baltimore team that we usually are used to seeing. I'm predicting them to go 8-8 this year. Yeah, not very high on them. Let's move on to Cincinnati Bengals, another team that I have no expectations from this year. They are just talentless in almost every position you look at. You look at from the top, they finally got rid of Marvin Lewis after 16 years of pure mediocrity. It had to be done. They knew Paul Brown knew that he could not just keep this guy around anymore. He needed to make a change at the top. So they hired Zach Taylor, who was the QB coach with the LA Rams. He's coming over to fix Andy Dalton, I might add. Andy Dalton has been in the league for a while now, but he hasn't taken that next step yet. I'm not sure why that's the case because he has the tools. He has AJ Green. He has Joe Mixon in the backfield. And he has Giovanni Bernard sometimes too. Just not sure what's not working for him. They lost Vontaze Burfict on the defense side of the ball, but that's a good thing. They won't get any stupid penalties moving forward, which is a great thing for the Bengals because the Bengals actually have a pretty good defense. It's just that Burfict, every time there was any heated play, he would just get involved and just ruin it for that team. They also lost their offensive lineman, Jonah Williams, who was their number one pick this year in the first round. It's really unfortunate. He's out for a season, so that doesn't help them any better. I just don't see Cincinnati doing much this year, so I'm predicting 6-10 season for them. Let's move on to the team that no one seems to stop talking about, which is the Cleveland Browns. The world is watching them. They have all the prediction. The Vegas is on their side. Everyone's on their side. I'm not. Sorry to disappoint Cleveland. I just don't think firing Greg Williams at the end of last season was a good idea. He was making that team do so well. Baker had a good rapport with him. They were doing everything in their power to keep that team uplifted at all times during last season when Baker got inserted in the lineup. But I don't know why Cleveland ownership had to make a change. They brought in Freddie Kitchens, who's never been a coach in the NFL level before, so I don't have any expectations from him. I don't know how well he's going to do. On paper, they have a lot of talent. They added Kareem Hunt, who will not be available until week 9. They have OBJ, the trade from the Giants, Jarvis Landry. They did trade away Duke Johnson, but they still have Nick Chubb. They have a lot of firepower, not to forget David Njoku, of course, Baker Mayfield. I just think it's so many egos in that locker room, they're bound to implode at some point of the season. Because let's face it, NFL season, it's all about highs and lows. When they go through their lows, I just don't know if OBJ will be able to keep his cool. I don't think Jarvis Landry will be able to keep his cool. Of course, Baker Mayfield also a head case. Great player, don't get me wrong. Nothing against him. I just think he just needs to tone it down a little bit. I'm not high on them. I know Vegas is. I'm giving them a 7-9 season. I could be wrong, but as of right now, I haven't seen anything that would change my mind. And move on to the last team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Apparently everyone's down on them because they lost Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. I think that's a positive sign for Big Ben Roethlisberger because remember, he went to those 2 Super Bowls and did just fine without Le'Veon Bell. I think Antonio Brown was in that second Super Bowl team, but I don't know if he was the Antonio Brown that we know for as of now. So I don't think this would be an issue for them. They added a couple of pieces on the defense side of the ball. They added Steve Nelson, cornerback from Kansas City. They also added Mark Barron, linebacker from LA Rams. They also drafted up to get Devin Bush in the first round of the draft this year, which should help their defense. Their defense will be good again. Offense is going to be on Big Ben. You have James Conner. You have Juju Smith-Schuster. They're going to be just fine. I think Pittsburgh is being looked over this year. And I don't think that should be the case because every time you count them out, it is, at the end of the day, they're still the Steelers. So they will be there to the end. I'm predicting them to have a 9-7 year. So that's AFC North for me. Let's move on to the NFC North. And the first thing I want to start with is the Chicago Bears, who lost their defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio, who was incredible with that defense last year. He moved over to Denver to coach that team. Now they have hired Chuck Pagano, who we last saw as the head coach with Indianapolis Colts. Maybe he will be able to sustain that great defense that the Bears have, especially when you have Khalil Mack, who should not struggle. They did lose Adrian Amos and Bryce Callahan from the secondary, but they added Buster Screen and HaHa Clinton-Dix, so they should be able to do just well. Offense side of the ball, Mitchell Trubisky has to take the next step. In the playoff last year against the Eagles, I think he folded a little bit. He was a little gun shy. Maybe this year, that experience from last year will help him immensely, and he will take a step forward. Jordan Howard got traded away, so now they're going to have a rookie running back in David Montgomery, who they picked in the third round of the draft this year. Not sure what the expectations are from him. They have Tariq Cohen. They also added Mike Davis from Seattle in their backfield. The Bears are not bad. They're actually a pretty good team. It's all basically on Trubisky's hands on how far he can take this team. I'm going to give them a 9-7 record this year. Let's move on to Detroit Lions. They hired Darrell Bevell, the offensive coordinator from the Seattle Seahawks, who has been with that team for God knows how long. So he comes over to help Matthew Stafford. Let me remind you guys something about Matthew Stafford. He was the first overall pick the same year as Mark Sanchez in that draft. Mark Sanchez played in 2 back-to-back championship games. Granted, he had a great team around him. But Matthew Stafford has only taken the Lions to the playoffs maybe twice and never won. He's 0-2 in the playoffs, whereas Mark Sanchez is 4-2 in the playoffs. I know a lot of people are thinking you can't compare the two, but you can. Because when you come from the same draft class, you had all these years to be regarded as a top quarterback, and you still can take your team over the top. Especially when you had Megatron all those years. You never done anything with him. So, yeah, Matthew Stafford, I don't know how long he's going to play in the league, but he is barely average at this point. He's going to have a lot of health issues. They added Trey Flowers, Jesse James, Danny Amendola, CJ Anderson. They had a lot of pieces, but I don't know if they're going to be good enough for him. They also drafted TJ Hawkinson from Iowa, the tight end who was highly regarded pre-draft. So maybe he will be able to help the offense, but that defense side of the ball, they lost Ansah. They lost LeGarrette Blount. They lost LeGarrette Blount on the offense side too. So I just don't see anything from them. I think the Lions will have at best a 6-10 season. It just Matthew Stafford just doesn't do it for me. Next up, we have the Green Bay Packers. Now, Mike McCarthy's finally gone after 10 plus years. Aaron Rodgers, a lot of times we've been giving him a pass, but this year we have to hold him accountable. He doesn't have any excuses because the GM finally went out and got some pieces on the defensive side of the ball. They added Zadarius Smith, they added Adrian Amos, they added Preston Smith. This is a good defensive unit now. So Aaron Rodgers will not have any excuses, especially with their head coach and Matt LaFleur, who was decent with the Titans as OC last year. Apparently they've been hitting it off, so hopefully they will turn around that offense. You're going to have Aaron Jones running the ball. You're going to have Devontae Adams, who's going to be very highly rated this year. You're also going to have Marquez Valdes-Scantling and a few other receivers. Also Jimmy Graham, who has been dropped off from the face of the earth for the last few years. Maybe he still has something left in the tank. We'll see. But I'm going to bank on Aaron Rodgers again. I think this is the final year. I'm going to give him a final chance. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he can take this team to a 10-6 record and make the playoffs. No excuses this year, Aaron Rodgers. As much as I love that guy, as much as I think he's the greatest quarterback I've seen in terms of talent, this is the year he has to step up and prove it. And finally, we have the Minnesota Vikings, where not a lot of changes, which is good in a way. They did lose Andrew Sendejo and Sheldon Richardson on the defensive side of the ball, and Latavius Murray on the offensive side of the ball. Dalvin Cook will be back, so that's a huge upgrade if you ask me. And also, you still have Xavier Rhodes, You still have Mike Zimmer coaching that defensive unit. Kirk Cousins got paid last year and then missed the playoffs. Yeah, it's a lot on him. The spotlight is on him this year. He needs to earn that money that he received last year. He honestly put the bullseye on himself. He did that offseason video of him signing last year. Clearly that rubbed off the wrong way. The Vikings fans are upset. You had Case Keenum who took him to the NFC title game. And now you have this guy who got paid and can't take it to playoffs. I don't know what has to change for this guy, but there are no excuses. I'm going to give them a 9-7 record just because there's continuity there. But Kirk Cousins, the league is watching you. Let me know what you guys think about these picks. Next week, we will dive into AFC and NFC South picks. Until then, it's Talking Pigskin, signing off.